Hey guys, so today's video is going to be all about using the Reddit API. So if you're not familiar with Reddit, it is reddit.com, a popular website where people talk about things. And today we're going to go through the Learn Python subreddit. We're going to use Python to determine who the moderators are and then go off and collect a whole bunch of their activities so we can work out when do they actually go to sleep or something along those lines. At the very least, you're going to learn how to request information from an API, how to package that information up into functions, and then how to call those functions and generate data frames in pandas. We're even going to output that to Excel. Stick around to the very end because all of the code is going to be there for you to use, extend, and share. Let's get into it. Okay, let's get down to business. Now in front of me I have the Jupyter Notebook. Now if you haven't got a Jupyter Notebook available, make sure you download Anaconda. That's my preferred method. Or head over to pythonanywhere.com. It's a really good cloud-based Python environment. Now, what we're doing today is obviously we are going to navigate to Reddit, and the final outcome is to determine when are moderators most active commenting and posting. So how can we do that all automatically in Python? First of all, we need to obviously navigate to Reddit. Now I'm here on the Learn Python subreddit, which is this one here. Now I want to figure out, okay, who are the moderators? So to do that, I need to scroll down and have a look at moderators, view all moderators. Now there's a really cool trick that you could do in Reddit, which I didn't realize was a thing until recently. You can actually just add to the end of the URL .json. And what gets returned is just a JSON file. So as you can see here, this looks very similar to how we operate with dictionaries, and we can actually use Python to request this directly. Now, I've done some testing before hitting the record button, and I do know that Reddit is pretty fussy with its headers. So we do have to define headers, and you do need those to be able to request this page. Easiest and quickest way to request headers is to go and F12, hit all, refresh that page. So down here, you'll see that we've got the actual request, which is what you see here. If you're familiar with my previous videos, you know I just hit copy as curl. Then I head over to my favorite little website, which is this curl converter, link in the description. Paste in your curl command, and then what you get in return is this very nice Python command. So what we have here is a request. It is using a get, and it's going to reddit.com/r/learnpython about moderators.json. So shift enter on that. Okay, that's run. We can see that's run because we can shift enter on the response to 200. And then if we were to just ask for the text of that response, what we actually get back is a text object. And we know it's a text object because we can say, hey, what's your type? And if we look at the type here, it is a string. Now that's using the attribute text on the response object. But if we say, hey, give us some JSON, okay, shift enter on that, all of a sudden it does look, already starts to look a bit different. And if we ask for its type, we now have a dictionary. So all that means is with that dictionary, and what we can probably do is be a bit smarter about this. We've got response, and then we'll use something called maybe JSON underscore response. Okay, so JSON underscore response is equal to response.json. Alrighty. And now we have a list of moderators. So just let's go through this data together. We have a kind user list data, and then that has a series of, let's have a look. It has a key called children, and then it appears to have a list, and that list has a name, who is the moderator, author flair, mod permission. You know, at the moment, I'm really just after just a list of moderators. So let's go ahead and just pull out, and what we're going to end up with is a nice list of moderators. So how do we do that? First of all, let's ask the JSON response for its keys. Okay, so .keys tells us there's kind and there's data. Now, if we look at obtaining data, it's as simple as going square brackets, show me the data. And then what data returns is a single key called children. So let's ask for children. Okay, and what we're left with is a list, and we know it's a list because of the square brackets. And that list contains a series of dictionaries, and each of those dictionaries has a series of keys. So one way we can get the name of the moderator is we could quite easily do a simple for loop. So for, item in, and we've got a list here, and we can say, let's go ahead and print the item, and we're printing the item name. Okay. And that gives us a nice list of our moderators. Now that's kind of the long way. We're going to have to append that to another list. It's going to get a bit confusing. Probably one of the easier ways to do this is to use something called list comprehension. And the first time you use it is a bit confusing, but it is as easy as square bracket, item for item. So it's very similar to what we just wrote. Okay. The best way to read this is for item in, and here is the for part, and in this part here is what we saw before, which was inside the loop. So if I run that, nothing actually changes. We're just asking for the items within it. But what we can do is we can very easily, similar to a second ago, just put the word name in there. Alrighty, and what we got now is we've got all the moderators in the list, good to go. Now I've just noticed here there's one called auto moderator. We don't want that. So what we could also say is we could say if, and we can say if the item name, alrighty, if the item name is not equal to the auto moderator. So that one there, shift enter on that, and beautiful. So we now have a list of moderators. So what we can do here is we could say mods are equal to, and now we have a variable that holds that list, which will return a list of moderators. So the cool thing about that is we have very quickly, using that .json part of this, we've very quickly been able to obtain that list of moderators. What we might choose to do from here is we'll go ahead and we will bring all this together, and we might package that up into a nice little function. Okay, so to package that up into a nice little function, all we need to do is bring all of that together. Now you'll notice here there's some cookies set. We probably don't even want them, so we'll get rid of those. Okay, let's have a look. So we've got the headers, the response, the JSON response, and pretty much the mods. Now these headers, I'm not a huge fan of any sort of global variables, and if we put this into a class, we can obviously make it an attribute, but for now we're just going to leave these headers outside of the function because we can keep using those inside our functions. What we're going to say is define get mods, okay, and this is the function to get the mods. Now what you'll probably pick up on is right now we are only looking at learn Python, so we probably want to make this a little bit more clever in the sense that we want to be able to pass in the subreddit. So let's go ahead and do that now. And one way we can do that is we can say subreddit, which is now a local variable to our function. Okay, and just what we'll do is we'll put a little f string in here. So we'll start that off with an f, and then rather than learn Python, we'll just put in some curly braces and say, hey, whatever I pass in as the subreddit at the top here, I'm going to return those users. Now, as I'm saying that, I've just realized I probably don't want to return a list of mods. I probably want to return a list of dictionaries which have two keys. One key tells me the subreddit, and the second key tells me the mod name. And the reason I want to do that is I might choose to then iterate through 10 subreddits, and each of those be returning that nice little list of dictionaries. Okay, so let's go ahead and modify this query just a little bit. To do that, all we need to do is have a look at how we are returning item name. Now what we can do is we could actually modify that, and what we might do is we might just pull this out for now so we're not constantly rerunning this query. We'll pull that out for now, clear that one away. So right now this is bringing back a nice list of the names, but what we actually want to bring back is maybe a dictionary each time. So we'll start off by putting that into a dictionary, and we'll give that a key. So the key there is mod name, or mod, just mod. Okay, shift enter on that. And now what we're bringing back is we are bringing back a list of dictionaries. And the cool thing about a list of dictionaries, inside that list of dictionaries, and if this is getting a bit confusing, and it can be the first time you do it, so that's okay. And we're going to want to know the subreddit as well. So what we'll do is we'll say the subreddit, okay, we'll make sure we're inside the dictionary there, the subreddit, okay, that is equal to, and now right now we'll just put the word testx, we'll replace that with an actual subreddit in a moment. Shift enter on that, and what we have now is we have subreddit as test, and this is the mod. Now, the reason I put the word test there is we do want to pass in that subreddit variable that is local to that function. So what we'll do is we'll copy and paste that and just replace that one there. So what we have now is we now have a function that returns the mods. So let's make sure we put the word return in there. So return mods. Okay, so define get mods, asks for a subreddit, has a response object, which is a requests get, which looks at this URL and passes in a subreddit name, asking for the moderators, the JSON return object, and then we have this very Pythonic way to use list comprehension, okay? To cut down on all those tricky for loops, we basically grab the name, but we also define the subreddit. So make sure that's working. Let's shift enter on that, and let's test it out. So one way we can test that out is we can say get mods, and we can pass in a subreddit. Get mods for, and let's have a think about who we want to get mods for. Let's do the same one. So learn Python, okay? There we are, there's all the mods for learn Python. Now if we wanted to get a bit more tricky, we can say learn programming, so programming, shift enter on that, and there is all the mods for learn programming, okay? Great, so now we have a function, a standalone function that we can ask it a question, and it's gonna say to us, hey, here is all the mods and the subreddit, okay? Now that we've got this standalone function, which is really cool, let's go ahead and scroll down and navigate to one of those mods and figure out how do we get some of their activity. So we'll go with the first one here, okay? We'll go with wub, and let's just see if the same trick works again. So if I just put a .json at the end, .json, alrighty. What do we get? Okay, beautiful. It looks like it spits out a number of things. We've got a kind of T1, all right, and it looks like the word kind appears quite a bit in here. Yeah, kind, T1, T1, T1. They're all T1s, what I've selected, which is fine. I'm just looking for activities. I'm not too fussed if it's a comment or a post or whatever, but to make sure I'm getting the right things, let's just check with the Reddit documentation. So Reddit API T1, I'll just Google that quickly. Okay, so let's have a look. So T1, beautiful. So T1's a comment. You've got an account, a link, a message, a subreddit, an award. Okay, perfect. So we're just looking at comments at this stage, and that's fine. So let's just have a look at when people are leaving comments. Alrighty, nice and easy. So what we've got now is we now have a way to navigate and get a user's activity. So to bring that into Python, it's a very similar exercise to a moment ago. So what we'll do is we will take that URL, alrighty, and we're pretty much going to, same as before, we're going to go ahead and create a response object. Now, it doesn't matter that it's got the same name as the previous one. This response is now local to that function. Cool, so now that we have the user, what we can do is we can take that URL and run a very similar exercise to before, but where we have the user ID, we can, similar to the subreddit, we can pass in maybe, just pass in the word mod, okay? Now for testing, what we will do is we will just use a temporary variable called mod. That way it's all kind of set, okay? Make sure we put the single quotes around that. Fun fact about Python, you can use single or double, doesn't actually matter. So now that we have the mod as a temporary variable, what we can do is we can run that same sort of process as before. Now shift enter on this one, and what do we get back? We check our response, and we've got 200, which is A-OK. And similar to before, we can say, show us the JSON. Now, a little bit different to how it's structured, but from what I could tell, once we get down to children, then we've got the 25 responses. Now, let's have a look at how we might navigate through these. So, similar to last time, we can ask for the keys. Okay, so again, we're looking at data. Now, the keys on data, let's have a look. I think it was children. Alrighty, so if we look at children, and I'm noticing there's something here called after, which could be a way for us to navigate and collect more information beyond what this returns. So children, and then children appears to have, similar to before, a series of dictionaries. So if I go to what is the length, okay, as expected, we're getting 25 results back, which is good to see. And what we can do is we can say, okay, what information here is important to me? So what I want to know is, I don't really care about the type of activity. All I really care about is the author, which we kind of have because we've asked for that particular person's, information. And then we've got the created UTC. So at this stage, it's ultimately just the created UTC. I'm not here to pick out any of the details of any of their comments and what they're getting up to. Obviously, you can if you choose to, but for this exercise, I'm not doing that. So how do I get the created UTC? So let's have a think about that. Similar to before, what we could do is we could do a bit of list comprehension. So item for item in, and you'll get used to that. And again, this word item is literally just a local variable for this little loop within the list comprehension. I could quite easily say blah for blah. It doesn't honestly matter as long as they're the same, because you're saying, hey, for blah in this, do something with the blah, and it's iterating. So it does it 25 times, and each time you want it to do something. Now, inside here, we've got something called created UTC. So what we might do is we'll see if we can pluck that out, and we'll leave this as blah as an example. Go ahead and ask for the created UTC. Now, that hasn't worked. What have I done wrong? Let's find out. So what do we got? So we got kind. Okay, here's a problem. Kind, and then it goes to data. Now, once we're in data, then we can get the created UTC. So a bit of an oversight on my part, but I'm glad you saw that because it just proves I'm not perfect. Cool, so now we've got approved UTC, and obviously we want created UTC, which is that one there. Alrighty, so created UTC is available. It's coming back as what appears to be a float. Okay, so it's got a decimal place there. Now we are probably going to want this as an integer at some point. We may as well make it an integer now so we can get rid of that floating point arithmetic. So let's go ahead and just wrap that around an integer keyword. That just makes sure it's an integer, and what you'll see happen here is it will actually get rid of anything after the decimal place. So we're going to have to do something similar to what we did before. So we are going to, if you recall, we've got subreddit and then the mod. And in this time, I'm kind of wanting to get the mod and then the date of the post. So what I might do is I might, again, create a dictionary object, okay? And what we've got is we've got some activity. So activity UTC, okay? Shift enter on that, and what you're gonna notice straight away is I've got an error. That's weird. Let's figure out why. Okay, I can see why. My brackets in the wrong place. Shift enter on that, and straight away by putting the curly braces around that and that colon there, that's now made that into a dictionary or key value pair. But obviously I want a couple of things in there. I also want to include the mod's name. So similar to before, we've got mod and we've got the mod variable name. Now they are different. You can see here one has single quotes around it, so it's just a string. The other one does not, so it's referring to the variable name. So shift enter on that, and all of a sudden we've got the mod and the activity sort of UTC. So we're getting places. We are getting that activity, which is quite good. Now I'm not sure if 25 is going to be enough for us to sample to see certain interesting things or patterns in this data. So what I might do is I might see if I can crank that up a little bit. One way I can do that is we'll go back to our response JSON. So let me go ahead and just give ourselves some space. Okay, now that we've got some space, let's have a look at that response JSON, because I do recall seeing something in the area of after. Let's see where I saw that. So if I go keys again, I've got some data, okay? And in data, I have something called after. Now, I've done some pre-reading. I'm not gonna tell you fibs here. I've done some pre-reading, and I think I can do something like this. After, okay, after has a value. Now, if we pass after into our query, our response query, so this one here, similar to how we do .json, we can do question mark after equals. We can go ahead and we can ask for the next 25 comments and then the next 25 comments. Let's have a think about how we might be able to iterate through this user's comments by using this after part of the puzzle. So the best way to do this is I'm thinking, okay, we have the moderator, that's all good, that kind of stays the same. What we kind of want to do is say I'm going to use an underscore purely because I'm not going to use the variable in this for loop, and you do see this quite a bit, especially if you've used things like OpenCV, computer vision package. It uses underscores quite a bit in how it functions, but the underscore just says, I don't even want to say blah or whatever. I'm just going to say underscore. So for underscore in range, okay, range 4. So all that's going to do, and let's give ourselves some space, underscore, range 4, and it's just pretty much going to run a loop for us 4 times. I am running 4 times. Okay, there you go. You've run 4 times. Now, that's a really quick and easy way for me to say, well, if I'm getting 25 posts and I want 100, I'd run it 4 times. Now, if I want it 500, I'd run it 20 times, okay? So what that looks like now is we have the ability to run a loop 20 times, but one thing we do have to do as part of that loop is we have to make sure that we are updating the URL to include the new after, which sounds a bit silly. Now, what I might do is I might actually break out this little URL here, alrighty, and just give it a name. URL is equal to this little guy here. And what we'll do is we'll pass in that variable. Now, what that means is we now have a URL that we can then sort of modify each loop and then have that after sort of part in there as well. So to do that, what we'll need to do is we'll first need to, outside of the loop, okay, define after as a variable. So after is equal to none. Okay, so none is no value, nothing's in there, it's just basically empty. Okay, and if I look at after being none, so what I could do here is I could say, well, after is equal to none, and then I could do something as simple as if after is equal to none, okay, let's go ahead and call the URL this version here, which is just the straight URL you get the very first time. Else, so if it's not none, let's modify that URL just a little bit to put a question mark at the end, okay, and pass in after. Alrighty, and that will only be triggered if after is populated with something. Now we do need to populate it with this part of the response, okay, which looks like this. So then what we have is in our for loop, the very first time it runs, there will be no nothing in after, and then at the very end, after will be equal to, you guessed it, this little part of the query here, which is response.json data and then after. So if I shift enter on that, it will run the 20 times, but we kind of want to do something with the results. So we have some smarts here that does that for us, okay? We've got this JSON response, we're collecting all that information. So what we might do is we might go ahead and let's have a think about this. It's going to go in and it's going to generate pretty much this object here, which is this list filled with dictionaries. So outside of the loop, we might want to actually create maybe an empty list, and then each time this runs, we'll just extend that list. And by extend, I'll show you what I mean, but I'm just basically adding to the list. So to do that, we'll call this, let's have a look, activity list is an empty list, okay? And then when this runs, okay, what we might say is we'll go mod activity is equal to this, and then we'll say activity list dot extend. So just add everything from the mod activity list into the into the activity list. Alrighty, so let's give this a try, and to make sure it's running, what we might do is we might say print I am running. Okay, now shift enter on that. I am running. This is fantastic. We'll speed this bit up. Okay, great. That actually didn't take very long at all. Now we have this activity list, which has been extended each time with this mod activity. So what we can do now is we can say, let's just clear some of this information here. We'll start off by asking its length. How long are you? Fantastic. You are 500. Now if I open that up, let's give it a run. What we now have is I've been calling this UTC time. I haven't been very clear on what that actually is. So this is actually the number of seconds since 1970, sometimes referred to as epoch time, UTC time, Linux time, Unix time. Seconds from 1970. Now, it's not exact. Every few years for a little while there, I think there's been 20 or something. I can't remember the exact amount. There's been a few sort of leap seconds. So I believe this might be out by a tiny amount, but ultimately it is a very good, solid format of time that you can then format into a more readable way. So what we have now is we now have 500 examples of WubWub's activity. And what we can do with this information is we can determine some very interesting things. So let's go ahead and take it to the next step. Now that we've got this time function here, we probably want to make that a bit more useful. So one way we can do that is we can go ahead and say, and we'll just grab this one for now. So let's just say this is an example of time. So we'll say time example, right? So we're just going to do that as a temporary variable. Now, first thing we're going to do is we're going to make sure we import the time module. So why don't we go ahead and import time? Alrighty. So now that we've got the time module, that will enable us to do some very interesting things with the time. So you've got things like time.gmt time, and you can pass in this time here, okay? Shift enter on that, and what that's going to do for us is that is going to build out a time object, okay? Time structured object, which is pretty much going to tell us everything we need to know about this time. So, you know, the year is 2020, the month is the 7th month, it's the 24th day, it's the 6th hour, so on and so forth. Now, what can we actually do with this? So, now that we have this structure, we can actually go ahead and run a string from time. So what that looks like is, and let me just go ahead and paste this in here and explain it to you. So what we have available to us now is string from time, a format in which you want to, or how you want to cast that time, and then the time we brought in a second ago. So what that ends up looking like is shift enter on that, and you end up with this format, you end up with the date. Now the neat thing about this, I might ask for the date, but I might also ask for things like maybe the hour. So you can see here it's brought back 06, okay, so that was the hour. Now, right now for this analysis, I'm only going to grab the date and the hour for now. So what I might do is give this a name. So I've called this activity UTC, and what I might call this one is something like activity underscore date, and then I might give this one a name as activity underscore hour. Okay, so now that we've got that, what we can do is we can actually bring that back into our loop, and we can go ahead and build some smarts around that. So let's have a think about how we would go about doing that. Now we've got this really massive list comprehension that's getting a bit out of hand. I'm not sold on the idea of keeping it as a list comprehension after we've done all of that. So what we might do is we might modify that back to a for loop, just for ease of reading. So this is a very interesting point. There'll be instances where you go down the path of doing something very Pythonic, and then as it grows and gets a bit bigger, you might say, well, actually, you know what? If I came back to that in maybe 6 weeks' time, would I fully understand what this is doing in a couple of seconds, or would I have to go through and read that and try to really understand? So let's go ahead and modify that list comprehension and bring it back to a for loop, which feels a bit backwards, but like I said, it is probably the better way to go about it. So for blah in response.json data children, okay, what we are going to do is we are going to create, I'm going to create a temporary, I'll just create it as a dictionary. It's pretty easy. So the dictionary is this one here, okay, if we recall. So we'll just bring that back into this loop. We'll put it on multiple lines, so it's a little bit easier to read. So we are looking at mod, and we've got mod coming in from elsewhere, and we've got activity UTC, which is that one there. Now, activity UTC, what we might do just to make our lives a tiny bit easier, we might just create a small little variable in here. We might call it UTC time. Alrighty, which is that one there. So it makes it a bit easier to write UTC time rather than keeping on repeating that one. Down here, we've got the two examples we use. Now we'll convert these into keys in our dictionary. So let's go ahead and do that now. So we'll go, let's have a look here. So we've got activity UTC, we've got activity date, so that becomes a key as well. And rather than equals to, it is the colon there. And what else do we have? We have activity hour. Alrighty, so activity hour, bring that one in as well. Okay, great. So just looking at this one, we've got mod activity UTC, and we'll just make sure we've got the names of these correct. And we've got the commas where they need to be, so every one after it gets a comma. Now the final step here is we do have this dictionary. We should probably give it a name, something like the data dictionary. Okay, hold some data. Data dict is equal to, and this is the dictionary here. And then the final step is we have this data dictionary. Alrighty, and then each time we sort of run this, we do want to make a mod activity. So shift enter on that, and what's going to happen is it's going to say I'm running, and then similar to before, we will be able to ask for the activity list, but this time round we should have a couple more details in there. We will have the date and we will have the hour as well. So let's go ahead and run that and see what that looks like. Beautiful. So now we have the mod, the activity UTC, the activity date, and the hour. We are getting close to some really good analytical insight. So now we need to package all this up. So similar to before, what we're going to do is we are going to create a function which will hold the ability to pass in a mod and return the activity, okay? The 500 pieces of activity. So where are we at? So what do we got? So we've now got the ability to go ahead and input a subreddit and get a list of mods, and then input a mod and get a list of their activity. So this is feeling like we are pretty close. Everything's coming together really nicely. So what we might do is we might clean up this code just a little bit. So we've got our input requests, import time, we've got our headers, and we've got the get mods, we've got the mod activity. We've got pretty much everything we kind of need. Down here, I guess we can sort of start writing the program that's going to go ahead, go to the subreddit, get the list of mods, get all of the mods activity, and then let's do something with that information. So to write our little program, what we'll do is we'll start off by defining a variable called mods, and I think mods are just going to be equal to get mods, and get mods from the subreddit, say learn Python. Okay, so we type that in there, shift enter. Now in our little program we have a list of mods. Okay, so we are only doing Learn Python for now, but this does have the extensibility to go through tens, hundreds of subreddits if you really wanted to. Now, from the mods, a couple of things I should point out. One, we've defaulted this to 500. If they don't have 500 sort of comments, it may fail. We might need to do some try and accept stuff in there. We may not have time in this session, but if that is of interest to you, definitely leave something in the comments. I'm happy to keep extending this. We can do it as a little group, a community. I think we can build something really cool. So now that we've got the mods, what we want to do is for each of those mods, we want to collect up all of the activity, okay? So I'm going to create a very silly variable name called all of the activity, okay? All of the activity. All of the activity, okay, is equal to, let's have a look at this one, activity is an empty list. It's an empty list. Most things start off as empty, and then we're just going to pack full that activity filled with all 4 of these mods. So how do we do that? So what we're going to say is for mod in, okay, and for mod in the mods list. Now, what that leaves us with is it's going to give us not the mod, it's actually going to go ahead and give us the dictionary back. So that looks like this. So what we might do to make this a little bit easier to understand, we'll call them items. Again, these variable names don't actually matter, and to the point where we left one as blah, it really doesn't matter. For item in mods, okay, we print the item, get the same thing. But what we're going to do is we're going to say, hey, you know what? The mod is equal to the item, and we're going to select the mod. Now that does get a bit confusing, but what that ends up looking like is, print the mod, we now have each of the mods. So what that means is we can pass that mod into the mod activity. So what that looks like is simple as mod, and we're going to have something called maybe mod activity. Okay, mod activity is equal to mod activity, which is a function, and we're going to pass in the mod. Now that's all good and well. That's going to go off and collect for us the, how many is it going to collect? It's going to collect 500 posts for each, but we want to make sure we are saving all that data for all 4. So what we are going to do at the bottom of that, we're going to say all the activity is going to be extended by, so we're going to add the lists together, the mod activity list. Okay, so what happens is we'll go ahead and try that, and if that does error out, what we'll say is, you know what, I think we've got enough from this particular mod. Let's go to the next one. Okay, so why don't we shift enter on that, and we can obviously speed this one up. Okay, so that's gone ahead and run. So what we can do now is we have all the activities. Let's go ahead and just first of all check its length. Okay, so the length of all the activity, and beautifully, so we have 2,000. We have 2,000 posts that are available to us, which is really nice. So what we can do is we can do some very cool stuff with that. So what we might do is we might start off by just making sure we've got everything we're expecting. Really nice. And if we look at the very last entry in this 2,000, so -1, we have the very last mod. So the first thing we can do is we could say, and we should do this at the top of the screen, we should say import pandas as PD. Okay, importing pandas as PD gives us the ability to say something as simple as the data frame df, just a simple variable name, not the best name in the world, but it's going to do us just fine for now. Data frame is equal to PD dot data frame, case sensitive, and what we can do is we can actually just pass in the list of dictionaries. So run that now, shift enter, and what we have available to us, let's give ourselves a bit more space here, is we now have this data frame, which you guessed it, looks very similar to a Excel spreadsheet. Okay, we are running a bit short on time for this video. If doing visualizations in Python using matplotlib, plotly, seaborn, all those types of things is of interest to you, please leave a comment below. But let's not kill the video before we get an output. So let's go ahead and go to_CSV. Okay, we'll call this output1 because that's a great name for a file name. Index equals 0. I don't want the index. That's just this one to the left here. So shift enter on that. And what I can do now is navigate to my folders and open this up in Excel. Okay, great. We've got this open up in Excel. So what I can do is very quickly, and look, I'm 99% sure you guys are going to comment below and say, yes, Adam, we want to do this pure Python. Let's do this. But what we'll do for now is we will open it up in Excel. And what we can do is we can bring the mod in here. And then we can say, hey, by maybe hour, show me, I don't know, give me a count of how many activities or when you're most sort of active. So what we can actually show is the volume of activity by mod by hour. Now this is in UTC time, but what you can very quickly realize is that certain moderators have certain hours of the day where it appears they might be sleeping. So we're going to stop there for now, but as you can see, we've gone through and we have actually been able to tap into the Reddit API, which is really cool. We've been able to do it smart and build some functions that show us how to, first of all, get the moderators of a subreddit, and then get the activity of each of the moderators or any user. You can just pass in any user here. It doesn't have to be a moderator. And then from that, we've been able to create a big list of dictionaries. And then from that, we have actually been able to create a nice little data frame that then we can do some really cool and interesting things with. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please consider subscribing if you haven't already, and a big thanks to all of my subscribers. And look, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments. I try to get back to as many as possible. If you're new around here, check out some of my other videos. There's more and more coming. Thank you so much.